And we are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my other co-host, the other co-host of this show. See, I already told you I was really tired. Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. It sounds like I'm in much better condition than you are with all the craziness you're going through. Well, not bad craziness, but good craziness. Sounds like Ben's killing it on the baseball diamond.
Did you see the bomb? Did you see?
Did
you see the bomb? Yeah. So for
did.
people that don't know, bases loaded, two runners on.
Mm-hmm.
Ben Ruffino hits a massive bomb. You know, our head coach got hurt. Coach Blake had to come in. Just throwing this out there, we scored 14.
He got hurt.
He rolled his leg, like pulled or either tore or pulled his calf muscle. So Coach Blake had to come to the plate. 14 straight runs with no outs. I'm not saying I'm the best T-ball coach of all time. All I'm saying
Sounds
is
like you should be coaching.
Well, and last night in the bottom of the third inning, bases loaded, no outs. Ben Ruffino up to the plate, and I tell him hit the ball to second base just to get the runs in. Try to get 2 runs in. Mm-hmm. Don't want him to get, just hit the ball hard to second base. He hits a line drive to second base. That poor girl puts her glove out and she does this, and she catches it. It's just like standing there. Well, it hit the ground first. And I'm like, run, little dude, run. And he's gone. So 2 runs score. We wind up winning. So if you need a T-ball coach, Joe, all I'm saying is
I don't need a T-ball coach, but
I'm the Billy Martin of T-ball coaching.
Sure. I don't know who that is, but I believe you.
Grayson says I have a spider on my wall. Do I really?
Am I going crazy? Where is there? This is some real modern day content right here. Someone pointed out there was a spider on your wall, and now we're both looking for it. I don't see a spider. I think Grayson's screwing with you.
I think he's screwing with me. I'm not gonna lie. I just got a little terrified.
Yeah, he made. Okay, all right.
Okay, well, I'm not gonna lie. I almost shit my pants. Grayson almost made me shit my pants. You know who also shit their pants yesterday? The Georgia Bulldogs. Is Jackson and Cantwell is heading to the University of Miami. Joe, we'll talk about that. We'll do an Indiana deep dive. If we have time, we'll talk about Saban here at the end on SEC Network with Paul Feinbaum. And then week 1 games and their time slots. We'll give maybe a little slight preview to a couple of these games here. But, Joe, let's start off with this. The 6'8", 325-pound tackle out of Missouri, Jackson Cantwell, commits to Miami. Your thoughts?
I think that it's been a little weird that there's been some adjustment to the projection on Jackson Cantwell recently. I'm going to ignore that because when I watched this kid and I broke down his tape, I was so excited. You just mentioned his size. This kid is massive. He is a grown man as a junior in high school. He has the power.
Technically, he's a senior now, Joe. Technically, because it's May 15th or May 14th.
Yeah, right. He's going to be a senior. He's got the movement skills. He's also got the power to be an Olympic-level thrower. That's the craziest part about Jackson Cantwell, and he loves putting kids into the ground. This is a truly important program cornerstone type of a prospect that Mario Cristobal just landed. And I think the most interesting part about this, if you talk to a lot of people, they all thought that he was going to go to Georgia with Jared Curtis. A lot of people were saying that he was even Cantwell was trying to recruit Jared Curtis to go to Georgia because he was expecting to go to Georgia. And it ends up changing at the last second. A hard late push by Mario Cristobal in Miami. This is a massive, massive recruiting win for them.
All right, dude, before I go here, do you want to bring up the Nakos thing in your opinion about what he said?
I think that Shannon Terry kind of, he chimed in on this by saying that, Pete knows what he's talking about. Last time Pete called somebody out for making moves for money purposes, we saw what happened. I don't think that Jackson Cantwell is like Nico. It's not what I'm implying. But he hired Drew Rosenhaus. He has the biggest agent in all of college football recruiting. I don't know anyone else is repped by Drew Rosenhaus. Of course.
Well, there's a lot. There's a lot, actually, believe it or not, that is sponsored or that is put up by Drew. I know of 3 LSU guys that have Drew a couple of SEC guys. I mean, but here's the thing. He undercuts all the other little agents that are out there because he uses his NFL percentage. He's not trying to make money off these kids. What he's trying to do is like, hey, man, I'll take a lower percentage up front, but what I really want you for is I want you for when you get in the NFL. That's where the real money's being made. Here's what I want to say. It is a cornerstone, as you mentioned, for Miami to get this young man. He is, look, chase the money, call the kid whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. The kid can play. There's a reason he's one of the top, and if I guess considering who you talk to, because of the position he plays, he might be the top prospect in the country. I think, Joe, here's what I'm going to say. I don't know if he's a left tackle. He's 6'8". I do
think he might be a right tackle. I was listening to another show today that was kind of pointing out his play style would be better at right tackle.
Okay, well, that's where I'm going. He's not a left tackle. I'm just going to – he ain't got the footwork for left tackle, and I'm going to be honest with you. He's going to grow a little bit more. He'll be 6'9". Dennis Rowland was the head coach of Southeastern Louisiana. His son played at the University of Georgia. He was 6'9". Joe, you got to be nimble out there, Big Daddy. I mean, I'm sorry, but it doesn't matter. Penei Sewell was a right tackle in the league. Is a right tackle in the league. So, look, they have done a really – and Mario's an offensive line guy. Offensive lineman going with Mario, who was an offensive line guy and was the offensive line guy during the massive surge of Saban, does not surprise me in the slightest. Alabama's best recruiting came under when guess who was Nick Saban's O-line coach? Are you ready for this? We're talking about him. It's Cristobal. So when you look at the recruiting and development that they've had, they're about to start hitting a lot of offensive linemen. He wasn't at Oregon long enough for the recruiting, signing, developing, and you add Penei Sewell. But then after that, I mean, he was gone from there. He is stacking up, and he'll have another kid this year from Miami that's going to get drafted very highly. And listen, you get another one here. I got to point this out, though. Joe, the reason teams like Miami come back is what they did financially. I don't want to overstate. I don't want to, make this a bigger deal than what it already is. Can we call a spade about what happened here? If you're talking about development, if you're talking about winning, if you're talking about everything else, you go to Georgia. So everybody talks about the SEC for just a minute. Joe, 5 years ago, this kid's going to Georgia. Let's be honest.
If NIL doesn't exist, it might have been a little bit different. A little bit different. I mean, come on.
I think that, yes, it's very clear, Blake, that money was a factor in this, but at the same time, everybody's offering in the same ballpark. And there's also truth to the fact that there's always the sudden chance that maybe he changes his mind before signing day because somebody comes around with more money that's always on the table.
Very true.
I almost kind of think the whole money conversation with him is a moot point because, yes, it probably influences decision-making. Yes, it's a lot of money, and he is a generational offensive line recruit on most platforms. Teams are going to want to get him. It's hard to get good offensive line recruits. It's hard to get good offensive linemen in the transfer portal. So you're going to spend the money there. So he's making this decision for money, but I also think at the same time he is still making this decision to go and play for a good football program. It's not like he's going to Purdue.
No doubt. No doubt. And look, I'm not arguing that point, right?
Yeah.
I'm not arguing the point of that he's not going to a place that can develop him. Cristobal has literally shown that he can do that along the offensive line. They did make it he made it a bigger deal than what it was by calling out Nakos.
Yeah, I didn't think you need to do that.
Well, he's an 18-year-old kid. What did you expect? 17-year-old kid. What did you expect? I mean,
he sounds like he's 30, by the way. It's hard to the way that he called out Nakos. I'm like, this is an 18-year-old. This guy sounds older than Nakos when he's talking the way that he framed that.
I will say this, okay? I understand them wanting to end that because you don't want everybody and their mama in your small hometown coming up to you and saying, "Hey, buddy, can I borrow $100?" I understand protecting the kid. You know who's supposed to do that? Drew Rosenhaus.
Right.
Who, by the way, this is the second time that a Drew Rosenhaus client and Nakos has gotten something right.
Who was the other one?
I'm not going to say. And no, it's not. And no, it's not Nico.
Okay.
Let's not act as if that Drew Rosenhaus, who, by the way, has a good relationship with On3, is not doing that. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time on that as much as we did, but we got to. I mean, like if we're going to talk recruiting, we got to point out the obvious. And Joe, good on them. Like when we talk about players getting paid, why would Miami? Why does anybody, if they got the dough and they want to pay it, why are you pissed off about it?
Right. I thought that was like inevitably a really toxic talking point yesterday. I think that like the main focus and the more better angle to place with this, it's great for Cantwell because he's going to a team that is coached by an offensive lineman. I completely reject the notion that they don't develop offensive linemen when Francis Malgoa steps in as a true freshman. He has
where's he going in the draft? To really interrupt you, where do you think he goes in the draft?
At the very, very least, he's a top 50 pick. He has the tape to be likely a first rounder. So if you're as good and you can capably do that and you can step right in at right tackle as a true freshman, he'll be on that same path to being an even higher draft.
Bona fide right tackle, and they went and got another one. Something that he brought up too, I want to bring up. He did say after he took some petty shots, which petty shots were taken at him, who cares? He did say that Miami spent, and I'm quoting here, Miami spent the most time recruiting me, and they spent the most time getting to know me. That's why I'm going there. So I do think that was very true. And in recruiting, it still does come down to relationships in some points and fashions.
Yeah, and I think that as we've kind of talked about here, Cristobal has always had an emphasis on offensive line, and he's slowly been getting going. He's had a lot of success in the transfer portal of getting guys, too. They've done a really good job of recruiting centers in the transfer portal at a very underrated clip with some of the guys that they brought in with, was it Matt Lee, and then Brockemeyer was the guy they had last year. They have had very good offensive line play. What is the one thing that we have talked about over the last 2 years?
They need to run the ball more.
Well, okay. We have always talked about what their success was going to be was because of the line that was protecting whoever was at quarterback. We talked about that in the Miami preview, that we have a lot of faith that Miami could be good with Carson Beck back there because his offensive line is going to be better this year than what he had Georgia last year. I would actually argue Georgia's offensive line development has been worse. Amarius Mims is the best guy that has come out in recent memory. And the whole talking point with Amarius Mims was he was underdeveloped. He was super raw. He didn't play a ton of football because he was banged up in spurts. But we can't say that Miami isn't a better program for preparing offensive linemen for the NFL when the team that they were competing with in Georgia has not produced high-level draft prospects along the O-line. They've had good linemen, but not the level that Miami's done.
Anybody at that level. It's more been on the defensive line where Kirby eats. So, I mean, the only difference would be I do think that the young man would get developed based off of just who he's playing in practice against every day. I mean, look, scheme is scheme, and you'll figure that out. Whether you go to Mario, you'll learn Joe, the technique that coaches are. Here's the biggest lie. You ready? For offensive line. You want me to tell you the truth?
Yeah.
Technique is technique. It's all the same.
It's a I mean, we've all been around good and bad coaches.
But Joe, when you go, listen to me. When you're zone blocking, there's only one way to teach zone blocking, brother. When you're doing a pass set, there's only one way to really.
No. I'm not disagreeing with that, but I just like the thing where I'm disagreeing is the communication on making sure guys get better and the.
I get that. I understand that. But that whole piece of like they do this better, they do that better. No, they don't. No, it's the same thing. They're all doing the same thing. Everybody does their own blocking schemes. For everybody that doesn't know, everybody. Name one team that doesn't. Oh wait, Army. There you go.
I do think, though, that there is merit to saying that Miami does develop their offensive linemen better.
Well, Cristobal does.
Yeah.
Right. Now, Cristobal, I mean, the reason they're doing that is because of him. Mm-hmm. And they only and here's the truth, though. They haven't had a first-round pick yet. Tate Ratledge still went pretty high. Right? So, I mean,
day two pick.
They still haven't had anybody in that area. They're about to have one. But I would just say I get what you're saying, but they still. I mean, Kirby has still put out a lot of offensive linemen into the league.
He has. I would argue that for the most part, he hasn't had. This isn't like a Notre Dame
He
level.
hasn't had the
or
Will
LSU
Campbells,
level.
the Kelvin Banks, the
Right.
who was the other big offensive lineman that went?
Tyler Booker.
Tyler
Alabama
Booker.
level. Yeah.
Wait, Jesus Christ. Cowboys
Right.
got a steal on that one. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I don't like the Cowboys, but they got a steal, which NFL scheduling. Why do y'all leak it? Why do y'all I don't
One
get
of the
it.
most mismanaged stupid things. I'm glad that college football doesn't do any of that shit. But
no, they just announce it when the deal's done. That's the
Right.
great part. Like, look, this ain't there's no big deal. Here it is. Anyway. Elks with a $5 super chat says, ain't it funny? Mario said they ain't bowing to players over money, but drops $2.5 million for a high school kid, making more than the 33rd overall draft pick. Do we really know that that's what he got paid?
I don't. Okay, first of all, with the NIL stuff, we never know with exact certainty the amount of money that a player is making. Everything is speculative. These numbers are not public, and eventually it will be. I think with the whole Deloitte clearinghouse that's supposed to be taking shape with
they came out today. They can't. Let's not get
let's not get into that.
Yeah.
Minus the number, I think that statement is different from this circumstance. Bowing to kids for money means if you've got a player who's already on the roster demanding more money, or he's going to go in the transfer portal, things along those lines. Somebody trying to manipulate a situation, push for leverage to make more money. It's very different when you have a kid as good as Jackson Cantwell. Jackson Cantwell is a very hard to come by offensive line recruit. I implore everybody to go look at his shot put numbers.
Nobody's 6'8", 325 and moves the way he does.
No.
Parents
are Olympic athletes.
Did you see his dad? Did you see his dad's hand size, Pauls?
No, I didn't. How big are his hands?
I mean, like frying pan. It's the big show head ass. I mean, his dad's huge.
It makes plenty of sense.
Makes perfect sense. You know who his daddy is. I mean, no pause, but I mean, like you do. The last thing for me here, I would just say this. It's a great pickup for them. I think that when we get lost in the sauce, when it comes to recruiting, we get lost in the sauce, and it is what it is. By the way, I'm going to say it. Deloitte, y'all need to shut up. I mean, I'm sorry. I couldn't help myself.
I didn't dig into the Deloitte thing, so I don't have.
The great Bill King, who was my mentor, and a lot of people that cover college football. Me and him talked about this morning on his show. The only thing that I'd say about, and they did it to the ACC, and we're talking about a kid that's going into the ACC. Joe, how do you know that 70% of these contracts wouldn't go through? Is it the language on the contract, or is it the money? Because guess what? Deloitte is so dumb that they think that they could stop the money. You can't stop the money, you stupid son of a bitch. You can stop the contracts and you can change the language.
Well, I think what part of the problem was that there were a lot of deals where money was being handed out and obligations were not being met. And I think that is why they're saying that a certain percentage of the deals that have happened in the NIL era would have been considered illegal. I don't think that there's been a lot of NIL deals that have actually been tried to have been held to a certain standard.
But see, here's the thing. If I signed a contract with a kid and I don't make him do anything that we agree to, it's my prerogative, not yours.
But God, I don't even know where to start with that. And not that what you said is wrong.
It's not wrong. I know it's not
because wrong. You're technically right, but there's a third party here, which is the NCAA. And the NCAA is allowing for these deals to happen.
They don't
on
have
the stipulation that they I know, but at the current moment, it makes no sense for Deloitte to have said what they said.
Bingo.
There has not been anything placed. There's no rules in place.
Bingo. Welcome to Deloitte. That's all I'm going to say with history with them. All right, Joe, let's talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. When we come back, is Indiana going to – do you have a Coke that says Joseph on it?
No, it's some random – I hate that Coke Zero does this or Coke does this. Where they put the name. I don't know. I bought it at the bodega by my apartment.
I'm telling your girlfriend you got a new girl.
Okay. All right.
Even though you just spent the whole week with her or whatever. I'm telling her.
Yeah.
I mean,
Go for it. I mean, this is just a random bottle of Coke Zero. It's stupid that they put these names on it. They didn't have a
Georgia dude. Do you need to tell something?
No comment.
Let's talk about good friends over BetOnline. Joe, is Indiana going to make the playoff again this year? We talk about that next. Also, when we return, we'll talk about those week 0 and week 1 matchups. Big Ten. Can we get games in noon? Can we get games off of noon? Can we have some night games around here?
There is so much that we could talk about with that. They will never move off of that noon slot. They never will.
Dumb. It's so dumb. I'm
sorry.
Fox
wants to own noon. It's that simple. I mean, it's like we don't need to look really past that.
I mean, they may have built a whole show around it. What are they going to change it? Big afternoon, big night kickoff? I mean, what do we?
They want to own the noon time slot. If they own the noon time slot, they make millions of dollars. So they're never going to change it. Anyone can complain as much as they want, but they're never going to change it.
Very true. I just want to see a game at night. I think the intensity rises when people have been out drinking all day. That's all that I'm saying. All right. Joe, the team that came out of nowhere last year, the Indiana Hoosiers, made the 12-team playoff, having a fantastic season. In the first year, Curt Cignetti, I did Google him last year, and I Googled him again this year. But, Joe, the biggest question is not only what is Indiana going to be this season, but, Joe, the bigger question is, can the Indiana Hoosiers get back and find themselves in the playoffs with, quite frankly, a lot of, I hate to kind of say this, a lot better talent going into year 2, in my humble opinion, under Curt Cignetti. When you look at Indiana, the Fighting Hoosiers, the best team in the state of Indiana, what do you think of them?
The real ball knowers.
You completely missed what I just said there at the end. I said the best team in Indiana.
I ignored it. No, I ignored it. I promptly ignored it. The real ball knowers know Fernando Mendoza. The real ball knowers know how good Fernando Mendoza is.
Yes.
Last year, we saw Curtis Rourke in Shanahan's offense have a huge season. He was a really good player at Ohio, big frame, underrated athlete, was banged up, had a serious, I think, knee injury and still powered through it and finished the year. I think with that jump in production should make any college football fan realize that Fernando Mendoza is about to take what was a quietly promising season at Cal, where he made a lot of great plays that nobody freaking saw because it was on in the late slot on the ACC network or worse.
So they were on the CW.
Sure. I think that there is so much potential, Blake, with this team, this Indiana team. We're going to talk about their schedule later, as we always do. They didn't really lose very much. They're bringing back a lot of these G5 All-Stars that we talked about during the season, and they upgraded at certain positions that are going to make this team better. Again, we will get into those things. But the big starting talking point is Fernando Mendoza and potentially having one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football.
I think you started off at the best place with Fernando Mendoza. You know how much I've really liked going into the season talking about this young man. Look, when I look at Fernando Mendoza, there's a lot of things. I think about the postgame that he had at the end of the season and how emotional he was, that his team, after a bunch of adversity, they were even able to overcome. Joe, quite frankly, some of the just outright dimes that he threw. If Trent Dilfer were still on ESPN, this kid would have been a frequent on Dilfer's dimes. The kid can spin it. He's a lot more athletic in the pocket that people understand. And by the way, he can run a little bit. Joe, he is the key. Fernando Mendoza, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get in the schedule. The way that they want to do things offensively and the things that I think that we've already seen him do, I think that, look, we follow and we cover this sport 365. I don't know if the general public understands how good this young dude can be. I don't. I think that when everybody's like, you know, I envision, Joe, that we're in week 2 and everybody's like, who in the hell is Fernando Mendoza and why is he leading the Big Ten in passing? And I'm like, if you were watching Ruffino and Joe, you would have known this by now. The two can flat out spend it. The accuracy's got to be a little bit better for me. Joe, against a better competition, things got a little shaky. But he had his top running back that went down. He had an offensive line that was inconsistent, and he had a wide receiver core who sometimes didn't know what they were doing. And that's just a bona fide fact, not even an opinion. He continued to ball out every time that they needed him. Joe, the throws against Miami, the throws in a lot of these bigger games that they played last year, he was the centerpiece in that. The question for me, Joe, is one thing and one thing only about them offensively. I kind of feel like I think that Fernando Mendoza is going to actually do some pretty damn good things. Might even be one of the candidates outside shot looking in for Big Ten Player of the Year. And I really do believe that. Can they protect him? Because, Joe, in every big physical game that they got in, they got pushed around. And that, too, is not an opinion. I think of Michigan. I think of Notre Dame. I think of Ohio State. I think of the toughest games that they played. Joe, and when they were able to go up against tough opponents, what happened? They could not. They got out physicaled. And that is the bottom line. Now, you bring in 3 offensive linemen, a guy that you know really well, and Pat Coogan. They bring in Benson. They bring in Mikowski. Excuse me. You look at the 3 offensive linemen that 2 of them might be starting on the right side of the offensive line and a new center. Coogan, who's got some experience. Joe, the biggest question is not Fernando Mendoza. Quite frankly, I don't know if it's the receiving core because they got a lot of production returning in that receiving core too. My question becomes, at the end of the day, how do they look on that offensive line? Joe, if we're being honest, what does Curtis Rourke look like with a little bit more time? What does their offense look like if they're not completely dominated against, quite frankly, 2 teams that were in the national championship game a year ago in Notre Dame and Ohio State?
I definitely think the offensive line question is an important one to direct here. And it's the double-edged sword that we always talk about with transfer portal movement for offensive lines. They're bringing in 3 new guys. I think Pat Coogan is a really good starting point because he was a starting level guard that I think a lot of big teams.
Do you think they make him play center? Do you think that that's his best?
I think that he's probably going to play. I would assume that he's probably going to play guard. But we know that a lot of teams would have killed to have Pat Coogan join their offensive line with how bad some of these big P4 programs O-lines were last year going into this year. There's plenty of teams that still have unanswered questions. It would kill for a Pat Coogan. I think that I feel more optimistic because last year it was pretty clear that when you have what feels like a bunch of G5 guys contributing on that O-line, you needed to get better talent in that group. You could get away with the premier underrated players like Elijah Surratt, Mo Kamara, D'Angelo Pons, those guys stepping up and going from G5 players into premier
Joe, those 2
guys for that team.
Seasons in the Big Ten now.
No, but what I'm saying with that is that those guys weren't offensive linemen. You need to recruit and find and develop a specific type of prospect along the O-line. This is a step in the right direction. I think that these transfer portal additions for them this offseason is going to be helpful. But there could be a question that we're asking ourselves midway through the year. Is their offensive line still up to snuff? Can they protect Mendoza as you're talking about?
I don't, Joe, that is going to be the biggest question. I think Curt Cignetti, from an X's and O's standpoint, and even the way that he builds this team, they are good enough. And I say good enough. They are good enough in certain areas. They get a massive upgrade at quarterback, and that's not a shot at Curtis Rourke, but it's a massive upgrade. I hate to say it like this, but it's just kind of true. Their season rides on what that O-line looks like. Because, quite frankly, I thought defensively, Joe, they weren't bad. They weren't a bad team. C.J. West was arguably one of the best unkept secrets last year in college football, and he just got drafted. I'll get to defense in just very quickly, but the main thing is, Joe, the main thing, if they don't find a way to get more physical up front, they're going to get absolutely destroyed in some of these games. And look, some of the final scores were closer than some people, like ourselves included. Like, we thought some of these may be a little bit of separations, but they weren't. But the bottom line is when they matched up against a ranked opponent, when they finally got that shot, that was the inevitable. They just got pushed around. When you bring in G5 offensive linemen, that's what you got to expect. Let's see if they do it there. I will say this, Joe. Their D-line might not be bad. Their D-line might not be bad at all. So as we just got done talking about their offensive line, Joe, defensively, they got a lot of players returning, but like Aiden, I think of Aiden Fisher, I think of Kamara returning, but they also go in the portal and get Daly, they get Wheeler, they get Lewis Moore back at safety. So defensively, they might not be bad at all. They might actually be pretty solid.
I think that this defense is going to be a backbone for them because we saw a lot of games. I mean, this is why they were wiping every mediocre Big Ten team that they were playing. This is why all those outcomes were so lopsided and why I think a lot of people were willing to stand on the table for Indiana and say, like, hey, they might not be playing anybody, but they're still putting up a big fight. They're kicking everybody's ass. It was because of their defensive line. Now, they lost CJ West, who was a really underrated player in this last draft class. I think that Kamara is going to be an interesting name to pay attention to just in draft circles and college football circles because he was so productive this last year. I've heard nothing but great things about D'Angelo Pons, and I intend to watch him at some point this offseason as draft prospect, but a lot of people are high on him and what he could end up doing. I think, too, to give this defense even more credit, when we watched the Notre Dame game, the Ohio State game, the games where we were expecting them to get completely smoked, their offense had the troubles.
Their offense got smoked. Defensively,
right. Their defense was just on the field so much that it just very quickly wore down, and it was too overwhelming for them. And also, like for the Notre Dame game, Notre Dame outplayed them, but a 99-yard touchdown completely blew that game open. You know, like that was a big thing was Jeremiah Love's long touchdown. It was one play that completely took the air out of him and an interception by Curtis Rourke that also turnovers by him that completely screwed them. So this defense bringing back a lot of the key contributors should be the main focal point as we look ahead to their schedule in a bit, why they can repeat as a playoff team if the offense can make an improvement and be more consistent against their bigger opponents.
Joe, their wide receiver core, you're talking about we talked about them offensively. At receiver, we talked about Surratt, who was actually in my top 5 was receiver running back duos returning in the Big Ten. He had 957 yards, 8 touchdowns a season ago. You bring back Omar Cooper, but you bring in Mekhi Jackson as well. Last year, he had 745 yards and 5 touchdowns. The thing that I think about them is I do see some explosion. Like, I think Surratt's not necessarily your explosive guy. He's more of the possession, I'm going to out-physical you type of dude. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. They needed to get a little bit more explosive, and I think that they will be. And I also think that they have a dude that can throw it better. Like, I really think that they have a dude that can spin it a lot better. Joe, I don't know if this receiving core doesn't go off. I'm being a little honest. Because if you look at their schedule versus what they want to do, Joe, they're going to throw that rock around now, and Mendoza can do it. If they had that production with Curtis Rourke a year ago, why am I going to come in here and say that I don't think they can have that level of production with the receiving core that they have now? That is assuming that their offensive line holds up. Now, if they can hold up, they can do some things. Joe, the other thing that I would throw out here too, they're just bringing back a lot of production. So much production that you can't overlook. You know, Kamara was the guy that when he went into Indiana, a lot of people thought that he wouldn't do, I don't want to say do much, but a lot of people didn't know what to expect from him. Joe, he had 41 tackles, 15 tackles for loss, and 10 sacks in the Big Ten.
It's huge.
You bring in Stephen Daly. You bring in Wheeler. Joe, last year, Daly had 51 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, and 4 sacks.
This production that they have is nuts.
The production that they have is insane. I don't know if it's bona fide crazy to look at them and say, I don't know. I mean, they're not – here would be the thing that I would say, though. They're not coming out of nowhere anymore. They're not going to surprise anybody anymore either. You know what you're going to get with Indiana. But they're slowly building here. I see what Cignetti's doing.
I feel like, too, a lot of the guys that they brought in, and I don't mean to cast a stray at Florida State, they are this Indiana team is a portal-heavy team. But a lot of the guys that they're bringing in and that you see, you see the updated lists and the on-3 transfer portal rankings, and you're going like, oh, that guy's really underrated. That guy's really underrated. I really like what he did last year. Florida State's case, why they collapsed was that guy didn't play. That guy had a character concern. That guy got pushed out. Bringing in a bunch of guys that nobody knew that were premier big name players that underwhelmed. Instead, we've got Indiana capturing and taking advantage of players looking for new opportunities to join a new culture. I think one guy who encapsulates that is Roman Hemby, who they brought in, the running back from Maryland. He was really underrated. They threw the ball way too damn much at Maryland. He didn't get enough opportunities to shine as a runner, but he's also a really good receiving back. I think that he is going to end up being the number one running back on this team on the depth chart pretty quickly, because his dual impact as a runner and a receiver is going to be super, super useful for this offense. But it just all comes down to them seeing value and developing that value just like they did last year, and just taking advantage of being underrated instead of going after recruits that were overrated that didn't live up to expectations.
What do you make of them? Before we get to their schedule, what do you are we just overlooking Indiana again? Because
I'm not.
Well, I know you're not. I'm just saying there's been so much national stuff. Like, for example, let me just say this as an example. A lot of people put in their top 20 out there. You know what team I'm not seeing from anybody? Nobody. Indiana. And I mean this with all due respect. What the flying shit are y'all looking at? I mean, I'm not trying to be rude. I'm dead serious. What in the flying Joe, they have a kid who had double-digit sacks in the Big Ten returning. I understand that people from the draft are like, oh, well, I see this. I don't give a flying shit about that. The kid had 10 sacks in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to me how he brings the quarterback down. None of that matters to me.
I think Cignetti would honestly prefer being unrecognized. I think that Cignetti would prefer that people are down on them. I think that that's just the way that he operates. And I think that when you were as good as you were, a lot of people thought that you were unjustified in where you were ranked and where you finished, that your record was a flash in the pan, all of those things. I think that they're completely fine sitting in that conversation.
I mean, Joe, stay with me. Does Michigan have, like, are there less questions at Michigan than Indiana right now?
No, there's more questions at Michigan than there are in Indiana.
Point taken. Let's look at the next Big Ten team that's in the top 25, just some of these preseason polls already. Illinois.
I think Illinois is justified where they're being placed. I think they're justified.
No, but would you have a discussion about Indiana being able to beat Illinois? Because I don't know if they
I don't know.
Indiana today.
I like Illinois. I like Illinois' defense more than I like Indiana's defense. I think that.
Give me Mendoza.
I think Illinois is.
Give me Fernando Mendoza.
Okay.
That's such a fun name to say. I'm
like,
is
that why you like him so much? Is just because his name's fun to say?
Fernando.
That's exactly what it is.
No, I mean, I think the kid can really spin it.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, Joe, if their offensive line does not get out physicaled, shit.
No, I mean, that's going to be.
I mean, what do they have not returning? Are we projecting some of these guys that all of them are returning are going to get worse?
No, I don't. And I don't think it was as much of a flash in the pan as some people want to make it. Why don't we take a look at their schedule?
Let's take a look at their schedule. That's where I'm going. All right. So, Joe, read off Indiana's schedule for 2025.
They host Old Dominion, host Kennesaw State, versus Indiana State, versus Illinois at home, at Iowa, bye week, at Oregon, versus Michigan State, versus UCLA, at Maryland, at Penn State, versus Wisconsin, bye week, and then at Purdue. I don't think that they're going to beat Penn State on the road. I don't think they're going to beat Oregon on the road. But if they can beat Illinois at home, a 10-2 season is completely plausible, and them going to the playoff. As long as they don't get smoked by Oregon and Penn State on the road and they lose those games by like a score, which is plausible again.
I mean, they got at the end of the fourth quarter, they got spanked by Ohio State. I mean, let's be fair. Let's be fair here.
It's a different team, though.
I get it.
Highlighting.
I get it, but I mean, Oregon's still Oregon. Joe, I got to be real with you. I see the floor 9-3. I see the ceiling 10-2.
I'm gonna go 8-4 as the floor because there's general unknowns. There's a world that like Michigan State is a team that they could surprisingly lose to.
Okay,
Illinois, we're talking about here. They go to Iowa, and Mark Gronowski, which we're gonna have to talk about this Iowa team soon. That's another team that they could get snuck up on and lose to. So 8-4 is on the table for them. But if they close out against Illinois and Iowa, 10-2 is doable.
I just gotta be honest. I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound crazy. There are some Big Ten teams that are on this schedule that cannot outscore them. And that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Like, O-line issues or not. The O-line issues that I have is when they go up against Penn State and when they go up against Oregon. Joe, if they get to 24, if they get to 28 points, with all due respect to everybody that's on that schedule, Joe, I don't know if any other team outside of Illinois can get there. I don't know if Aiden Childs, with everything that they got coming back, can get there. I don't know that.
We are going to have a very serious conversation about Iowa, by the way.
I know.
They have an actual quarterback now. Mark Gronowski is a good quarterback. Oh, shit. Give me 1 second.
It's like an episode of Blacked. All right, hold on. Look, for me, I'll just say this. I don't know. There he is.
We're good.
What? Can you please get the stupid battery thing?
My setup doesn't allow for it. I've tried.
Yes, it does. You just need a plug.
We don't need to do tech. We don't need to do tech support.
Okay.
Right now. Let's get back to what we were talking about.
All I'm saying here is this. I look at this schedule, and for what it's worth, Joe, Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, and Indiana State miss me. I understand what you're saying. The stretch of Illinois, Iowa, and Oregon is a little bit difficult. The problem that I have there, okay, is two of those teams, I just don't know if they can outscore Indiana. I'm sorry. I don't think that they can. I think that they're going to be that good offensively to where, look, you might score some points, but Indiana's going to keep rolling on you. And I understand what you're saying about with Illinois defensively. You're right. That can happen. Iowa, same thing. But, Joe, they scored on these teams a year ago. And I understand that, times have changed. It's a different year. I get that. Joe, the teams that stopped them were bona fide playoff teams. It's only teams that stopped them, brother. I mean, like, what are we talking about? The only other one was Michigan that they overcame, but Michigan beat the national champion and Bama at the end of the year. I mean, like, okay. I don't think that look, they are a team that is more pass happy that we saw last year in the Big Ten. Name another. Maryland. Mm-hmm. Everybody kind of wants to line up and run that rock. They're going to sling that. They're going to sling that puppy.
I understand that. I think that you're discounting Illinois a little bit, which we're going to end up talking about. They're defensively going to be really good. They're returning a lot of really good and important players.
I'm taking Fernando Mendoza over Luke Altmaier. That is my deciding factor.
But I just think it's a little bit more complicated than just quarterback head to head in a matchup like that. I mean, we have to see. There's a very good chance that one of those two teams is a lot better than the other. But I think that they're very evenly matched. And going on the road in an evenly matched game is a chance that they could lose to Illinois. I'm not saying that they get their asses kicked. I'm just saying that it's a spot for them to lose.
Hey, Siri, text Fernando Mendoza and tell him that Joe doesn't like him anymore.
Okay, all right. That's not what I'm getting at.
I mean, you're a Fernando Mendoza hater.
No.
I understand what you're saying. I just think that they're going to be 9-3, 10-2. They're going to make the playoff or they're bona fide right there up on it. And maybe Illinois or Iowa is the team that knocks them off. But they're still right there, though, man. Let me ask you this. If they're 9-3, they are going to be a bona fide playoff contender. Doesn't mean a playoff team. They're a contender again.
Well, if they're 9-3, I don't know if their resume is going to be good enough for them to get in because, like, they're not going to have a signature win because they're going to probably, in that circumstance, they'd probably lose to Oregon, Penn State, and then they'd have a loss to Iowa or Illinois, like we're talking about here. So, like, they wouldn't have that like defining win that they can hang their hat on. But I think at the very least that Cignetti has raised the floor of this program and that they will be consistently competitive. And this year is going to be an example of that.
I will say this: you bring up the signature win thing with Illinois and Indiana. That was Lane Kiffin's argument. That was solely his argument. Name Indiana's significant win.
And they had a better record last year than 9-3, though. So that was like
they beat the SEC champion. They don't have a rank. They did not have a ranked win. So they did not beat a ranked team. Not one. The ranked teams that they played, they got smoked by.
Okay. Well, we don't need to read.
You just agree with me and
no,
Lane?
No. I'm not agree. They were 10-1. My point is that if they go 9-3, they're not getting into the playoff. It's very different than them being 11-1.
No, you know what's going to happen if they're 9-3. Whether we agree with it or with them or not, Joe. We got to hold on. We got to call up. We got to call out the reality. The reality is that they'll be in between 12 and 15 or 16. If you're 9-3, they will be there. They're going to be borderline there. It's just a fact, brother.
Well, they won't get in though.
No, they won't. But the argument that I always make is, who's the last game on their schedule? Purdue. Okay, Purdue. Shit. All right. Let's say that they're 9-2 or 7-2 going into Penn State week. Joe, that's the last month before a playoff push. So, I mean, like, we're talking about, like, hey, if they win this, they might make the playoff. That's how I look at it.
That would need to be a must-win for them if they're 7-2.
Well, of course, but you understand what I'm saying, right? Like, then if they do beat them, they're not. But if they do beat them, then you're just like, okay, well, they're going to make the playoff. The bad thing is they got to go to Oregon and to Penn State. They won't win those games.
Right. Bad draw.
Very bad draw. Hey, you finally got some tough schedules. Finally got a tough schedule. How about you? How about that?
All right.
All right. Joe, let's move on here. So Joe's announced that some of these games in week 0 and week 1, the times have been announced, and obviously the one that shook some people was that Texas and Ohio State are going to play at noon. Why are people freaking out when the Big Ten is always at home played at noon? Why is this a thing?
Ohio State fans, and we got 2 super chats that were related to this. A lot of people are just freaking out because Ohio State constantly plays the noon game. And I think that the echoed sentiment from Ohio State fans is because that they want to be able to play a night game. They want to be able to get opportunities to play outside the noon slot. But the problem is, outside of what we talked about at the beginning of this, is that Fox wants to own that noon slot on every single Saturday. And it just so happens that Ohio State plays the best schedule out of anybody. They're willing to schedule a Texas in week 1. Oregon can't play in these noon slots. They have a home game. They can't. They can't do it.
I mean, they would be 9 a.m.
Right. Yeah, they'd be 9 a.m. for them. So Oregon's not going to do it. If USC is good, they're not going to do it. If Washington's good, they're not going to do it. The Big Ten has a lot of good brands that could end up being ranked this year, but there's not a lot of good head-to-head matchups outside of that we could move Ohio State back on another game into the noon slot. My point is there's usually one good Big Ten game each week. And that's kind of what's killing it and why Ohio State keeps getting screwed.
Well, and can I throw this out there?
Yeah.
That's why I think the SEC kills them in some instances. Because there's always more than one, right? Like me and you got labeled, remember last year being SEC homers because we talked the SEC a lot. But people were mad that we weren't breaking down Ohio State versus Northwestern.
Well, I think that naturally that there's a lot better historical rivalries in the SEC. So it's easy for a situation where there is a 500, like Oklahoma, Texas is just a random example that comes off the top of my head. That's not a historic SEC rivalry, but it's an SEC rivalry in the middle of the season. Even when Oklahoma was bad, all eyes are on that game. Before the game, after the game, there's predictions, reactions that come from it. I'm trying to think of some of the other like lesser known rivalries in the SEC.
I mean, Auburn and Georgia. People don't realize how big of a rivalry that one is.
Arkansas LSU is an example of that. Like, I mean, like, I know it's not.
I don't
like,
even really care about that one.
I know it's not, but like from like the national perspective, if you're looking for a good football game to watch, you'll watch that game. It's an interesting game. It draws your attention.
Well, there's always goofy shit that happens.
Right. The Big Ten doesn't have that because most of the games the rest of the weeks are Maryland plays Iowa. There's no tie there. Rutgers plays Purdue. There's no tie there.
Nobody's watching that. There's nobody. I mean, let's just be real. Nobody's watching that. I don't care the noon thing. Look, there's a lot of really great week 1 games. I mean, starting Joe, congratulations. On the last day or second to last day of August, me and you get to start our day at 11 a.m. Central or 12 p.m. Central or Eastern, excuse me, with Notre Dame and freaking Texas. What are we complaining about? They don't want to move it? Fine. The game's still being played. I will say this. I understand what people are saying, though. You do got to put that in prime time. Like that one has got to be in, because you're talking about 2 premier brands, arguably 2 of the, if not the, to some people's opinion, biggest brands. It's got to be in prime time now.
Well, so I have 2 thoughts that come with that. One, ESPN automatically has, like, they're going to just do whatever they want. So they claimed Alabama, Florida State at the 3:30 slot. At 7:30,
well, they got Notre Dame in their primetime slot.
That's that one's on Sunday. 7:30 on Saturday is LSU Clemson. So they claim the night slot. I would rather.
Oh yeah, and we don't play good at noon, so I'm glad. Thank you. Never mind, Fox. I'm now that you just said that, Fox. Okay. I appreciate. Yes, that game needs to be played at noon.
I would rather Ohio State versus Texas be a standalone game. I think that Fox would rather it be a standalone game in order to watch it.
That's fair.
Let me ask you this, though. When was the last time that we've had an opening season game be something that's this, like, premiere of these matchups? Like,
the only time that I can remember for me personally, remember it was LSU versus Oregon, 2 versus number 3 on the road in Dallas, neutral site. LSU goes in. It was the year that who was on that damn Oregon team? Thomas was on that Oregon team.
The Thomas.
DN that didn't pan out. The really lanky DN that didn't pan out. That I think went to the Giants, if I'm not mistaken.
Dolphins. I'm blanking on his name.
That one was premiere for me. I'm trying to think. Bama always played some bigger names, but kind of cupcakey.
Was that game that you're referencing? Was that a noon kickoff game? Though?
No,
So I'm talking about.
number 1 game.
First game of Saturday noon. It's never that big of a game.
I don't know. No, okay, I see what you're saying. I thought you were talking about like week 1 premier matchups.
Well, I mean, we usually get like good matchups. Sometimes they don't end up playing to like.
I was thinking of Georgia and Clemson, the year that DJU came in and we started the show and DJU and them got blanked, but that was at night. I don't know. It's a great question. But I'm glad we get to start our day off with it. It doesn't bother me none. I mean, I'm going to be sitting there watching it.
Yeah. I'm trying to.
I would say, look, you got Tennessee and Syracuse for the orange, they get the battle for the orange. A sleepy game on Friday night in prime time. Georgia Tech and Colorado at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Boy, that is going to be electric as hell. And I'm going to tell you right now, sleep on Georgia Tech all you want to. Y'all go right on ahead. They're going to come in here and smack that ass now.
Man, you're just apologizing for last year for all the negative things that we said about them.
I was a Georgia Tech homer.
Oh, no, you weren't. You made fun of.
Pull up. I made fun of his throwing motion. That's about it.
Yeah.
I love their style of play. Joe, some of these other big games, Bama, Florida State at 2:30.
You ask my thoughts on that?
Oh,
I think that Florida. I didn't know where you were going with that. I think Florida State's going to get their asses kicked. I do want to spend time actually previewing some of these we did last year. That game though, I think is going to be a blowout. I mean, I think that game is going to be ugly. There's a chance that. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
No. What were you going to say?
Before we get out of here, because if we're going to break all these games down for week 1, and we can do that, kind of talk about it tomorrow. Notre Dame, Miami. Update. Did you see Carson Beck throwing the football today?
It looked pretty good.
He looked freaking, I mean, I say he looked good. He's throwing the ball in there. He's throwing the ball pretty freaking hard. That ball is zipping out of his arm. Joe, we got a game now. I mean, the first thought, this is not a shot at you, Notre Dame. I'm dead serious. When I literally saw him throw, I was like, okay, we got a game now. Like, because what did I say about Miami? What did you say? Brother, what do we make of Miami? Like, if he can't throw, what do we make of him? I think that, like, we got a game now in the sense of, I don't think Notre Dame loses. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, it's better that Carson Beck is healthy. He's good to go. And look, man, he can. It's kind of a funny little thing. If they do find a way to beat Notre Dame, you know what Georgia people are going to be saying? Well, shit, what if you wouldn't have gotten hurt in the SEC championship game?
Right.
I mean, game in the playoff game.
There's going to be toxic outcomes on both sides.
Yes.
Depending on what happens.
Maybe.
I might be at this game. There's a shot. Currently figuring that out. My dad really wants to go.
Why are you always going to Miami?
Well, I mean, this is just coincidental. We went to the Orange Bowl. Everybody who listens to the show knows my dad went to ND, hence why I'm a Notre Dame fan. So it's the most interesting game to go to. It's easy to travel to get to Miami. So we might end up going to this. I'll tell you what, though, Carson Beck, his arm might look better, but he better not make those same types of risky decisions that he made last year.
I agree.
Thrown into tight coverage against Christian Gray and Leonard Moore. Otherwise, he is going to freaking regret it.
The question becomes, does the quarterback on the other side, who we have no clue who it's going to be yet, do they make some bad decisions too?
Fair. Well, I at least know that they're going to run the damn ball, and they're going to lean on Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and that big-ass offensive line that they have. What?
Speaking of Jeremiah Love, dude, did he just hit the portal?
Don't screw with me. I know you're
no.
Where did you see that?
I'm seeing it on Twitter.
That's not real. You're fucking with me. I know. I'm too close to this situation for you, Matt. I know that that's not real.
Jeremiah Love transfer portal. Who would have thought it? All right, we'll see you. Boy, your heart dropped, didn't it?
No, it didn't. I know that he's not. Him and his dad reshared our breakdown video on him last week. We know that he's not leaving. I'll just leave it at that. Me and Ryan know that he is not leaving. I'm leaving it at that.
Man. Portal. Here he comes.
All right. Okay.
See you tomorrow. Peace.